this is Tracy Velt with HousingWire, and today I'd like to welcome Mark Johnson to the podcast. Mark is an author, speaker. He's the co-founder of Co-Recruit Systems and a business partner in Third Pool Recruiting Systems. He has a deep real estate industry experience as the former brand president and CEO of JPAR Real Estate. Company-owned stores, and under his leadership, they grew nearly 5 times in size in 5 years, with $8 billion in sales and 24,000 annual transactions, 4,000 sales associates. He has done a ton of research on recruiting and has a ton of data through his company working with brokers on their recruiting and talent attraction. And today he shared some really great information. One of the really kind of biggest takeaways is if you're not doing events for both recruiting and retention, or attraction and retention, you should be doing them. Right now, agents are very uncertain with the litigation, with the low inventory. They're struggling to really figure out where their next listing is coming from, what's going to happen in the business. And by having these events, you can really move them, as Mark said, from uncertainty and fear to a place of understanding and a way to really retain them in your business. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. It was really enlightening. He also explained kind of the difference between talent attraction and recruiting. It's not exactly what everyone thinks it is. So enjoy. So Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Tracy, welcome having me here today. It's been a while.
Yeah, I know. Every time I go to sell something on Poshmark, I think of your wife. So selling handbags.
Yeah, of course, she's currently now pursuing her nursing degree. She's doing that as well as the other. You guys share that passion, and I've learned a lot.
That's right. But we are not here to talk about fashion, unfortunately. We are here to talk about recruiting. So I want to start a little bit just because I think the idea of recruiting has really shifted to attraction. So I want you to talk a little bit about what the difference is between recruiting and talent attraction.
I just did a survey I had about 300 different people on a webinar we're doing, and over half thought they were the same and half thought they were different. Tracy, the analogy I would use is between branding and selling, right? One is, in a sense, branding, and one is selling. Recruiting is more selling, and branding is more attracting them into your brand. We know that people need to experience your culture. They have to feel a perception of fit. And some of the fastest growing firms are doing this through attraction events, inviting people into their latest business review event or some training event so they can experience the culture. That's attraction.
And so what do you think are some common mistakes that brokers make, maybe just in not understanding the difference and not doing the attraction side of it?
Yeah, if you're not doing the attraction side, then all you're doing is selling, right? And selling has its place, but how much easier is it? You and I know, we've been in the industry forever. How much easier is it when someone, in a sense, self-refers? I came to your event. I was really intrigued about your culture. I met a couple of your agents, and I felt like I belonged there. How much easier is that to do than to try and convince someone that, you have the best widgets?
Yeah. I mean, especially now, it seems that, it used to be, oh, I have all this technology and and that's become table stakes. So really, what is attracting you to the brokerage that you're going to? Compensation, not always, definitely not always.
No, well, we know, and we've seen some first surveys that would show that culture trumps compensation plans by almost double. It's not that we're not saying that compensation isn't important. It certainly is. But what good does it do to be in a great commission plan if the culture sucks? Right? It's energy draining. It's not fun, and so they seek other solutions. So culture first, branding, training, support, and then obviously you got to have the right financial model.
Yeah, and culture is one of those really difficult things because it really is who the leader is. And so if you're a leader who's very business like, old school, you're not going to change who you are. So you have to attract agents who are like-minded or really like that leadership style. So how do you authentically communicate that culture to a prospective agent?
I was it's so fascinating you asked this question because I was recently talking to a fairly major brokerage firm that doesn't do any award events. Think about that. Like I'd never heard of it before. I mean, everyone, does the awards and the trinkets and trash and whatever you call it. They built their culture around no awards. They don't do the monthly rankings and the annual, and because that's who they are. And so they're honest about who they are. They know that they have a total addressable market based on who they are, and they set their goals and expectations that here's our total addressable market based on who we want to be, and that's what we're going to go get.
Do you feel like there are trends with culture, kind of like the brokerage of the moment or something that really attracts more people um, than usual? Or, I just see some of these companies growing so quickly, and then some that are really struggling to grow who have really good leaders.
Yeah, you know, we're in an emotional business, and sometimes agents make an emotional decision. But long term, right? Um, we've written and have done some research on this concept called the perception of fit. People have to feel like I belong here, right? And so while there could be some elements of, I'm going to make it up, someone brings a big name speaker in and someone makes an emotional decision, right? But that's short term if once they get into that culture that they don't feel like they fit, they don't feel like they belong, they don't know how to plug in. All of these things relate to culture. Um, I think one of the things we talked about is um, retention that we'll get to, but agents want to know that that they can get paid on time, that they can get paid accurately, that they can get the support they need. That all boils into the word culture. That's part of who they are. And so I think I answered your question. Yeah, there's some short term things that happen, or agents make emotional decisions, but when they get in there and they don't feel like, oh, I made a emotional decision and now I don't know how to plug in, I'm not connected, the culture is not what I'm used to, then they bolt.
Yeah, yeah. Are there certain markets where agents are more likely to leave, like during a up market, a down market? Do they stay in place during a down market? What do you see in your practice?
What we're seeing right now, and we're dealing right now, we're working with about 75 different brokerage firms across 100 markets. In this current market, it's probably tougher than it's ever been because folks are paralyzed. All the news, we all know with the news and all the stuff that's going on in the industry, people are like, maybe I just need to think before I make a move. And so we're not seeing right now in any of these markets a lot of movement.
It's interesting. You'd think I think during COVID, I want to say there was quite a bit of movement,
There was.
which yeah, so it's interesting that during that kind of really uncertain time, people felt good about just leaving and going to another brokerage.
You know why I think that was? Because they needed different things and they needed it now. One of the things, I was running a major brokerage at that time, and we immediately instituted a daily, basically, sales meeting. And because we needed to over communicate, we needed to over support, we needed to make sure people were connected and knew what to do and what not to do. And in my opinion, if you didn't have that in your culture, they're going to bolt because they had that need. It's different than it is right now. Right now, it's like, oh, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen, and maybe I just need to sit back and observe for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about that retention piece because I think that you don't have a good talent attraction process without having a retention process that ties into it. And so what are you seeing as far as retention? What are the best brokers doing to retain agents?
So first of all, in my opinion, retention is recruiting. And retention is our first recruiting strategy, our first recruiting tactic. If you think about it, our existing agents are what? They're our biggest billboard. They're our biggest advertisement. They're the ones out there representing our brands and our leadership. And so retention is recruiting. And how do we recruit our keepers? I was thinking our good friend Steve, a number of years ago did a study about how we get closer to our people. I think we're going to talk about that later. But, one of the clients that we're working with, major brokerage, they realize that right now we're in a inventory constrained market. They've been following the Altos data and all the reports that you guys are putting out. And they started a 10-day morning mastermind on how to earn listings in this market. And they brought in their best listing agents who are having the most success. They also invited some of their prospects. And so they're pouring into their own people. They're showing some of the people they'd like to get, part of their culture. And so they have a retention event and an attraction event all in one. And it's been wildly successful.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that everyone is struggling with right now because of the inventory situation. You're just trying to find all of those, as many opportunities for listings as you can, and find those hidden listings as well.
And if you think about it, anytime you're in transition, anytime you're in uncertainty, we can go back in history. When you over communicate, when you pour into your people, when you give them more value than they expect, it pays dividend.
Yeah, absolutely. And they want to know that you care. So, by offering them valuable classes or, whatever it is, it really does show. And it's interesting about the awards because I've heard both sides of the awards. I've heard, well, it's the same agents getting the same award all the time. I'm never going to get it, so I don't really care about it. I don't want to see some leaderboard where the same people are up on the leaderboard and I'm never going to crack that. And, so it's demoralizing to some people and motivating to others.
Well, and I've heard this, and I've been around like you have. I've been doing this a long time, but I don't think I've ever met a company that doesn't do them at all. And so I was actually a little shocked because, I hear the same things that you're hearing and, in firms that I was in leadership or ran or had the same, but I never not thought of not doing them, but where they just don't do it as part of their culture. They don't do them at all. And when some of their few agents who bring it up, they have here's the why. Here's why we don't do it. Yeah. A lot of the reasons that you said, and it's like, let's spend that money and do things, and they spend it and redirect it in other activities in their culture that their agents love.
So what are some of those activities that can really drive both talent attraction and retention, other than, you talked about the listing, listing seminars. What are some other things?
Yeah, there's a number of them. One of them right now is, we all know, everyone's looking for best practices. They just want to talk to anybody who's having any success on tips, tricks, best practices on listings. The other thing that I successfully used in talent attraction was a quarterly business review. One, it's a discipline that many of our agents lack. And when you bring that discipline, guess what? Their per person productivity increases. And that's a retention tool. And by attracting people and inviting people in to experience those. So one of them is just a quarterly intentional structured business review. Typically, you want to separate that by new agents, mid-career agents, and advanced agents, right? So you can't do a one-size-fits-all, but 3 quarterly business reviews can be very, very powerful. And I don't see it being done a lot.
And why do you think it's not being done?
It takes effort. And so it's important, but not urgent. One of the things I think you're going to ask me, well, what are the mistakes I'm seeing? Well, we're spending all of our time in the urgent yet important quadrant, and we're not spending enough time on those important but not urgent things like planning a quarterly business review for our people.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hardest part of running a business, isn't it? You get wrapped up in the day-to-day. It's really any job, honestly. You get wrapped up in the immediate, and then all of a sudden days have gone by and you haven't planned and you haven't strategized, and you're just answering emails or putting out fires. Do you have any tips or strategies to help brokers really focus on those things and figure out how to structure their day? I mean, you've done it.
And it's so important because right now, think about it. Increasing our per person productivity is just as important as recruiting and attracting talent in. One of the things I've done is, I'm just more cognizant of getting caught up in the whirlwind. I know that 80% of my results come from 20% of my efforts typically. And I get very intentional about 90-minute sprints. I tend to work in 90-minute sprints. And I'll be phones off, do not disturb, 90 minutes towards this key objective. Then after that 90 minutes open, I can do phone calls, got a minute, all that kind of stuff. And then I'll go back into a 90-minute sprint. So different strategies work for different people, but basically I'm describing old-fashioned time blocking.
Yeah. I mean, and it's funny, I always hear you get up early. Now, I'm a morning person, so getting up for me is easy. I'm up at, usually around 5 a.m. And but a lot of not everybody's a morning person. Not everybody wants to get up and have that extra couple hours to plan their day or plan a business.
I think Hal Elrod wrote it in his Miracle Morning thing. He has a whole chapter on if you're not a morning person, because it's about the miracle morning. But and I relate to that because one of my hashtags, I'm kind of known for win the day. I'm the hashtag win the day guy.
Yeah.
You can win the day by 11 or by 11 because 11 comes around twice, right?
Yeah.
And so as long as you're winning the day, okay, what I need to do to win the day today are these 5 things. Those things get done by 11 a.m. or 11 p.m. They just got to be done. And so to win the day, what I try and do more often than not is when I lay my head on the pillow, did I win the day? And that can be in the morning, it can be in the afternoon, it can be in the evening, but you got to win the day. I was thinking, you made me think. I used to work for a chief operating officer, large, I think it was like the 5th largest brokerage firm at the time, and she would book all of her vendor appointments 12 weeks out. You could not get on her calendar. If you weren't in her 12-week block, you weren't getting in until the quarter. So she was very intentional about, now, if you're an employee and a manager and you had trouble, obviously you could get in. But for the routine, typical, hey, I'd like to pitch you my product, she laid it out very intentionally 12 weeks out. And she was like brutal on it.
Yeah, setting boundaries, that's huge. I know even for me, that is very difficult. I check my Slack constantly and I really should be avoiding it for hours at a time. So
put it in a time block, put it in a check my
yeah
time block. And then that it's there and intentional. For me, I really have had success with intentional 90-minute sprints on key objectives.
Yeah. Well, I want to get into some trends because I feel like things have changed some with it. Everything has stayed the same, but it's also changed as far as recruiting and talent attraction. So tell me some of the things that you've noticed and some trends you're seeing in the industry right now.
Well, obviously, there's a lot. A lot of the things have stayed the same, and we'll talk about that. But there's a lot of things that are changing. And as you know, these attraction events, business planning events, business development events, motivational events, best practice events like this one we talked about, how to earn listings in the current market. Things like that have changed, and they're happening all around us. And if we're not in that game, agents are noticing. The other thing that's changed is the use of artificial intelligence and AI in the MLS data. We've got tools like Corded and Realtyx who are serving up to us, hey, these agents are more likely to move than those. These agents that used to be at your firm who've left you, are likely to change. These agents who are rookie agents with less than 5 years are more likely to be more successful than these. So all of this artificial intelligence has really changed the landscape of data.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking to someone and it was really interesting because, they were like, "Oh, well, I noticed that this person kind of was doing a ton of transactions. They've tapered off, so now I know they're at risk of leaving. And this person, seems very successful, but they've somewhat plateaued, so they're also at risk. And they're using AI to kind of determine that. So, when you notice those things, what are some best practices to bring them back in the fold?
Well, hopefully you have events and training that are tied to these things ongoing in your culture. I always think about, what do I need to be doing to increase per person productivity? What are the things that don't just make you feel good, but make you more productive, right? And it's even more important because one of the things that's changed that we haven't talked about is the size of the market has changed, right? I mean, we don't need to say, in the industry, where we've gone from number of listings to today. In the Altos report, I think traditionally, Mike's been talking about 1.1 million listings, and now we're down to 665,000. And even though that's up 8%, it's still well short of historically, right? And so anything we can tie to about per person productivity in these events is super important.
Yeah, I've noticed a huge focus on that, even for transaction fee companies, yes, but even for low fee models that are charging maybe just a desk fee or something, they're not looking for volume of agents. They're really, really focusing on productivity right now, which, will really pay huge dividends in the long run. Because, if you focus on that, then, you've got it made. So yeah, I've seen a shift to that, especially with this market and the low inventory. They're trying to help agents.
And when you think about it, we should have been focused on productivity all the time.
Yeah.
Right? It's just this market is really forcing you even more so. Many of us are, and I know many of your audience listening in have always been focused on productivity, so it's not new news to some. But it's easy when the market is growing and expanding, and you're a little plump. It's easy to take that for granted, but right now you can't take it for granted at all.
So what things were working in recruiting or talent attraction that aren't working anymore?
We're not seeing right now working as well, just the old fashioned cold calling, right? There is some old fashioned cold calling, and you need to do that. But some of our most successful folks are, working off. They have a culture that naturally generates referrals. The number one indicator of a healthy business is the number of referrals you get. If you're not getting any referrals, you got to look at the health of your business, the health of your culture. And so we're seeing a shift to, referral opportunities, right? Seeing that, not that necessarily, cold calling is dead. There's obviously some cold calling components that can work, but not nearly as well as a referral-based recruiting system.
What about the old-fashioned like direct mail and things like that?
I haven't seen anybody that we're working with that has had much success with that, other than new agents coming into the industry.
Okay.
That they're having some success with continued with mailers. I was just talking to one of the owners of a Texas-based licensing school, and she told me every one of her seats is full. It actually surprised me.
Wow, that's interesting.
So that's the state of Texas. I haven't talked to other states at the moment, but right now she's totally full.
So, do you think the litigation is hampering recruiting at all, or and talk to me a little bit about that?
Look, anything that creates uncertainty. You and I know this, right? When you have uncertainty, what do people do? They pause, right? And just like salespeople, when we help salespeople get out of uncertainty, and fear, when you're in fear and uncertainty, you typically shut down. And so when people are in fear and uncertain, they shut down. What we're seeing though is where people can work through that, where they know their value proposition, particularly strong listing agents. They're not in fear at all. Um, it's interesting. Kind of off topic, but um, the top listing agent was presenting to a mortgage company recently, and they said, "Hey, I think the buyer's agents are going to get squeezed, and maybe your loan officers ought to become buyer's agents." But that's a whole other story.
That's interesting. I mean, that's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's really these lawsuits and the DOJ's actions are definitely going to impact the industry in some way. I think the people who will come out on top are the ones who are proactively looking for ways to, be more transparent and adjust their business models now, so that it isn't as difficult.
Well, and time and time again, those who provide value survive, and those who don't. And obviously, in the state of Texas, the school I was talking to, their brand new agent seats are full. So they're obviously informed. They see the same news we do. Uh, it's not scaring them from entering the industry.
It's interesting. So let's get down to kind of brass tacks. What are some top strategies for brokers and managers who are looking to up their recruiting, retention, attraction game?
Yeah. So we talked about it a little bit earlier. Let's get into the events game. We need to be in the events so other agents can experience your culture. And when you do that, you're automatically doing retention and pouring into your own folks for productivity. And when they're done right, you can do both. You can do retention and attraction. So number one is events. What's happening in your event strategy that's working for you or not working for you? Number two is referral. Referral, as we mentioned earlier, is the number one indicator of a healthy business. No referrals, you got a problem. And then finally, three, and this is interesting, is what I would call selection. Better selection. We've spent, my business partner Ben and I have been a silent partner in this business for over, for a long time, but the business has been around 17 years. We have a database of well over 15,000 real estate professionals where some of our clients that are using this have doubled their success. In using hiring, we've produced more top producers than their traditional hiring methods, and we've reduced their failed hires by half. Using assessment tools that can help identify some people just don't belong in this industry because they're not wired. They don't get their energy, they don't get their excitement from the work that's required to be successful. They can be very successful as an accountant, as a transaction coordinator, as a escrow officer, as something else. But if they don't get their energy from work in the tasks that are required to be successful, no coach, no training, no program is going to ever help them get over that because they're not wired for it.
Yeah. Do you think that's a trend now that brokers are being more selective and carefully choosing just overall the agents who they bring into the company?
They are, but I'm not sure they're doing it properly. There's a few
Okay.
firms that are using assessment tools, like one is the Core Capacity Index. There's a few others, some big name brands we know use assessments pretty successfully. But there's a role for a selection and assessment that is wildly underutilized. And we have an expertise in it. And it can help you be more selective where you spend your time. If you have 10 agents and you only have 2 hours to follow up, who are you going to follow up with? Well, we can show you which ones to follow up with and which ones maybe you ought to wait for them to follow up on you.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And so it's way underutilized.
I know the last question I have is really with the events, because I do think those are incredibly valuable. What about, is it a mix of in person and online, or do you all in person? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I think in today's world, you have to have a mix. If you're 100% in person, you're going to miss some people. If you're 100%, virtual, you're going to miss some people. So what we're seeing is a good mix of both. Agents love. They appreciate the flexibility and the ease of online, but they really miss the personal connection. And so it's a combination of both. And it really relates to, and I wanted to work this in. Our good friend Steve Murray did a study a number of years ago in the last downturn. And this is what I think we're all missing with these events and other things. And I don't remember all the stats, but basically he found 15 companies that grew during a downturn. And the only common factor was they got closer to their people. They got more relevant to their people. They got more valuable to their people. And that's the soft side of this business. That's, it's not the technology, it's not the AI, it's the getting closer.
Yeah, people want to know you care, honestly. They want to know you care. And, it could just be a simple phone call, but it is, and it's hard to scale. As you get bigger, it's very difficult to scale that if you're the only one who is going to do it.
I would argue it's easy to scale if you have a team.
Okay, yeah.
If a team can do it. If you're going to say it's just me,
right,
and then yeah, you're hard, but you can scale that with a team.
Definitely. Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining the RealTrending podcast. Any last words?
I think I would probably do what Steve said: get closer to your people. Let's get closer to each other. The relationship piece, particularly in times of uncertainty and fear, people are looking for leadership. People are looking for direction. People are looking for your point of view on how we move forward in uncertainty and fear. And when you can move people out of uncertainty and out of fear, big things are going to happen.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark.